What's up, everybody? I'm George Mossey. I'm here with Marshana, Dahlia, Spavento, and we have 90 Day Fiancé Season 8, Episode 11 that aired last night. And a lot of it seemed like the Mike and Natalie show. It was a lot of Mike and Natalie. But we're going to get that a little later. We're going to start off and talk about Tarek and Hazel. Tarzel, if you're nasty. We got... Last week, we discovered that Harry does not have COVID and he doesn't have a fever and he's doing fine. So the dynamic has changed, and now it is more so of time to find that hot girlfriend for Hazel. So I'm really worried that their relationship isn't strong enough to bring in a third party. And I think that Tarek's friend Angela feels the same way. So when they talked about it on the FaceTime call, she was like, y'all should really be focusing more on your relationship and building a strong foundation rather than bringing extra people in. And I actually agree 100%.
I agree with Tarek's friend as well. For me, their relationship is nowhere near strong enough. You just got to the same place to get to the point where you can even live together. You've had a long distance relationship. So going from long distance to being together in the same place consistently is an adjustment in and of itself. And then when you add to that, another layer of bringing a girl in, and we factor in jealousy and things like that, it's a little bit of an issue. For me, though, I'm still stuck on the fact, and I've brought this up before, that Tarek only has female friends. Like, Tarek has no male friends, and I'm not that kind of person who's super duper jealous or anything like that, but I just feel like when a guy exclusively has female friends, watch out for it. And then when you're going to bring another female into that situation, this has all the makings of an explosion, and I guess we're all going to watch it, right?
Well, right. We're going to watch it explode and ignite. And I think the one point that was brought up was Angela thought that this was something that Tarek wanted, and he was pressuring Hazel in. And that is also questionable because his best friend thinks that he would want to bring somebody else in the relationship. I feel like that's a red flag. It's actually not the case as far as we can see. Hazel insists that it's her. And when she's on camera, I do feel like it is her, but I feel like he's a little too excited about it. And I feel like he at first thought like he was kind of resistant, but now he's very excited and he's downloading the apps and he's setting up their profile and he's just a little too excited about it. And that's questionable to me because if you remember with the Minty situation, it did not end well.
Nope.
So I don't see how this is going to go any differently, but I'm going to watch it all happen and I'll enjoy it.
Yeah, I agree.
So let's talk about Mike and Natalie. So fresh out of counseling, they are 1 month before Natalie's visa expires. Natalie talks to her own private counselor on FaceTime, and the counselor decides to tell her she needs to figure out if Mike actually cheated on her with that best friend the day before the wedding or something that we learned about on the tell-all last time they were on the show. So Natalie is rehashing the past, and Mike is just to the point where he's like, look, you're here. We're trying to work this out. If you want to continue to focus on the past and bring up old fights, we're never going to be able to get to the point where we can get re-engaged and get married. And they're at a 30-day mark. And I actually agree with him. If she wants to get married and she wants to move on, stop bringing up the past.
Part of me does agree with the therapist, right? Because the therapist, is her personal therapist. They're not talking to Mike. They don't know Mike's side of the story. So I think it's right that the therapist has said, figure out if there is anything that happened here, right? Because quite possibly there's nothing that happened and you have nothing to worry about. Yeah. But you have to know if the fear is based in reality or not by finding out exactly what happened. And, I think that that's honest. And if she's stuck at that point and she doesn't want to believe what he says happened, then you got to walk away. Because either you're going to accept what he said, Natalie, or you're going to leave it all alone. So I don't necessarily blame the therapist, but if there's nothing that happened, fine. The therapist brought up a good point. If they had a romantic relationship in the past.
Right.
And then he stays the night at her house, the night before her wedding, which I doubt she's out there trying to, close a deal the night before her wedding, but whatever. You know, it's important to just kind of like know what happened and figure out if they had any romantic history,
Right.
because then that adds a different layer. But honestly, I'm really sick and tired of seeing Mike and Natalie each week. I feel like it's the same thing over and over and over. Every single time I see Mike's selling face, Natalie's complaining about the same ring that she threw back at him, and it's too much. It's too much now. Like, either we're gonna move this storyline along or we're just gonna let it go, because I've had enough personally.
I have too. Every time she says, I'll go back to Ukraine, I'm like, could you though? Like, could you though? Can we just reintroduce? We can reintroduce a new couple. We can do Stephanie and Harris, and we can mark them off. Because I'm just like, don't tempt us. Don't say you're gonna go and you're not.
Right.
So let's talk about Rebecca and Zaid. So Rebecca takes, I don't know, Zaid. She calls him something different every time. So she takes him to meet her son Brandon, who is married with children, and she sees Ziad interacting with the children, which again, some more insecurities come out, and she's like, well, I can't have kids anymore. And he seems to be interacting really positively with the children. What if he decides to change his mind? And she immediately starts grilling him to make sure that he really doesn't want children. So what do you think about that? Because he already said he didn't. So what do you think about her bringing these feelings back up based on seeing him with children?
You know, I think that Rebecca bringing this back up just really showcases her insecurity and not necessarily Ziad's pressure on her to perform. He hasn't really given her any pressure that we've seen. So this is internalized pressure that is self-inflicted. And furthermore, Ziad was really clear, like, I don't want to be thinking about this. I don't want to really think about this in the future. Like, you're thinking about the future, and none of us really know what that looks like, right? So right now in the present, he said, I don't want to be thinking for this. You know, I don't want to put my mind on that. And I think that that's a really smart thing, because no one does know what the future holds. He may very well, you know, at 35 feel different than he does at 27. And maybe his 27-year-old self is making a decision right now that his 35-year-old self might not agree with, but that's a bridge to cross when you get there, right? There's no need to ruin the present worried about the future. And every single time Rebecca was like, because once we get married, this is for life. Because once we get married, this is for life. Ain't this her fourth husband?
Yeah.
Third? Fourth? Yeah, like, sis, stop saying it's forever, it's forever, it's forever. You're not going to make Ziad feel like he's in a prison in a marriage with you because you've had 3 previous failed marriages, and saying that once we do this, it's forever because you don't want your 4th divorce. If you punch your 4th ticket on the divorce train, so what? At this point, you know, divorce, we all stop counting after 3. So there you go.
I felt like it was a threat because she was like, you cannot divorce me. Do you understand? And I was like, are you threatening him? Like, is this a threat? Like, should we call the police and save him? Is he in danger? Send a SOS. Like, are you holding him against his will? I was just like, no marriage is forever. I mean, if you want to go biblical terms, yeah, they are. But in the world we live in, no marriage is forever. So you can't say, she was like, you cannot divorce me ever. And I'm like, that's a red flag in itself.
Divorced. She's been divorced before. And listen, after 3 or 4 divorces, nobody's counting anymore. Just, you know, charge it to the
Keep it moving. All right, guys, that's part 1. We're going to come back with part 2, and we're going to discuss some pregnancy announcements and a breakup. So we'll be back with part 2. I'm going to put our Instagrams and Twitter at the bottom. I'm George Mossey. This is Marshana, Dahlia, Spavento. Thank you for joining us, guys, for 90 Day Fiancé, the podcast. This is part 1, episode 11, guys. We're halfway through it. I cannot wait to see what happens next. Thanks for joining us, guys. We'll be back soon.